Thank you and welcome for joining our webinar, which we're titling, So What, Now What? The New Realities of Remote Work in the Contact Center. I'm Zach Taylor. I direct strategic communications for Cisco's Contact Center business unit. I have some great guests today. I have Sheila McGee-Smith, president of McGee-Smith Analytics, renowned contact center analyst and person behind the contact center track at Enterprise Connect and making that forefront for us. I have Robin Gareiss, the president and founder of Nemertes Research, does a tremendous job in bringing insights and data to contact center decisions. And of course, our own Omar Tawakol, who is our senior VP and GM of our contact center business. What's really unique about this group of people is they bring interesting and different perspectives to what's going on around us. Now, as we know, we've heard a lot of words in the last few weeks, unprecedented, unique, etc. And those words actually apply to what's going on. But the contact center really is in the midst of this. So what I'd like to do is break our conversation today into 3 vignettes. A little bit about what's currently, and I think most importantly, and Sheila brought this up in our planning session, what's the midterm impact of what's going on? And then stepping back at the end and talking about what is the long-term impact of what's occurring globally now as we all have to adjust to some new realities. So I'm going to start with just asking a question here and just basically say, how is this impacting you, Omar? What is your observations?
Oh, there's no impact whatsoever. No, I'm just kidding. The impact here is tremendous. What I think there's two large drivers. The first one is all of a sudden a huge group of people have to be serving the contact center on calls from their home, and that's a big change for the people who run the contact centers. And then the second major change that COVID brought is just huge amounts of volume. So if you imagine you are, running a contact center business and you have to deal with both of these, it's like all of a sudden 2 black swans met each other, and it's a lot to deal with. The types of specific use cases those 2 conditions bring are really 4. Number 1, you have someone who used to have, a phone that was answered in a city office or in a county office or in a hospital, and all of a sudden they have a huge volume, so they set up an emergency hotline. That's use case number 1. The second one is, I have a contact center. I have hundreds, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of agents, and I'm going to send them all home, and that changes the design of my contact center and the profile of the contact center, so I have to react to that. Number 3 is I just have more calls. I'm an airline, I'm a travel company, and all of a sudden everybody's calling, and so I have to handle that. And number 4 is I just all of a sudden need to set up some sort of bot call deflection, so using AI to try to answer stuff before it hits humans. Those are 4 of the use cases we've seen spike up instantly that is really keeping people preoccupied.
Interesting, Omar. I like that. And then Sheila, we've heard terms like essential services, and our viewers right now are seeing a slide you shared with us in your neck of the woods. Sort of, we're in the same area of the country in New Hampshire around the notion of what is an essential service. What's interesting about this slide, Sheila?
So, as you said, I live in New Hampshire, and our governor last week put out his emergency order. And when I looked through the wording of that, it was, heartfelt to see the words in there about how the maintenance of communications infrastructure, which we're all involved in, that the work of technicians and operators and call centers are an important part of essential services and have to continue. So as we think about so many people who are losing their jobs and having to go home, very often it's a contact center behind that that's going to help them through that process. And so, it's one thing to think about going home if you're just a white collar worker. It's something else to be going home when you have to be helping to work those people transition out of jobs into healthcare, into hospitals. And so these notions of empathy and empowerment of this contact center, community that we've always served, so much more being brought to the fore over the last couple of weeks and as we stretch into the summer.
Yeah, we're finding out a lot of things that we didn't really, well, we might have known, but we haven't been prepared for, and now we're preparing for them in real time. Robin, you bring a great degree in having an understanding what's going on from a research perspective. What has your research said to your organization that you've captured about what people's preparedness and other factors regarding what's occurring?
Yeah, It's interesting because we finished some research like right at the start of sort of the shelter-in-place orders. So it was like the first week of March, second week of March, and I can imagine that data will probably be very different right now, asking how various virtual workplace technologies are, driving value and driving benefit and what companies are spending on it. It was already looking pretty positive, but I'd have to imagine it's really going quite a bit up since then. In interviews I've done since then, I think it was kind of a mix. Many people, I would say, were pretty prepared for this because they already had agents working from home, so they just said, okay, well, we just need to do more of them. Maybe they didn't realize how quickly they were going to have to do more of them, and how they had to really put all hands on deck to get everybody in place. Even some companies were saying just finding things like furniture, because some of their employees and their agents just didn't have a place to work from home, so they would go out and try and find desks, and they couldn't find desks. Just little things like that. The other thing I would say is that IT people did require some training on how to deal with some of the issues like networking, how do we set up the network at the home office, and how do we maintain security, and how do we follow the regulatory issues, especially in sensitive industries like healthcare and financial services, for example. And then the last thing I think I would say about that would be definitely talk to companies who had some challenges with just the cultural issues and the management issues and the analytics. So if I'm a contact center supervisor and I'm used to being able to walk around a contact center and check things out, I can't do that anymore. So now I have to really figure out how to manage my team virtually while still keeping our customer ratings at a good level, and I may or may not have the tools to do that. So those are some of the things that we saw.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I'd like to ask the group a question here, maybe some specific, more than anecdotal examples you've heard of things that are going on with companies or organizations you're involved with. I was out walking the other day. I see a lot more couples walking than ever before together on our block, and lady was walking her dog, and I had worked for home for 11 years, and this is the first time, and she was just talking about what a shock this was to her to be sitting in the corner, and she actually had to go buy a laptop because her organization wasn't prepared for this. So anybody else hearing anything like that? Omar, I know you were recently talking to some customers about this.
I really enjoyed talking to Sprint because they actually were quite prepared for this. They've had to test out programs where they send the agents to work from home. They've had to deal with situations where there'd be a hurricane, and they've even dealt with situations where they turned their stores into parts of their contact center. So the fact that they had they had tested out systems in advance really put them in a place where they were prepared. We did a video recording of that conversation with Sprint, so I invite you to listen to it. They shared the full set of use cases directly, but it was instructive to see the difference between folks who had seen something like this before, not COVID specifically, but having to shift a lot of people to work from home, versus if it's the first time, and this is really going to impact how we think through business continuity planning.
Interesting. And Sheila, you talked to a lot of companies, a lot of situations. What stood out to you in the last few days that you've heard about?
So almost the counter opposite to what Omar just discussed, right? A smaller healthcare company, 17 offices in pain management. So not a hospital where they would have had that kind of disaster recovery system in place, but think about the patient of a pain management operation, right? They still need what they need, and yet those offices are being closed down and those doctors are working from home. So we're talking about a population that had premises-based systems, and one option that they had was to just pick up their phones, go home, but then they had the concerns of how do we plug those into the system? How do we have HIPAA compliance? What are the security concerns? Do I need extra equipment in front of that? And this particular 17 office pain management group decided that a wholesale move to the cloud was the right answer, and they were able to do that within a few days. And within a few days, not just being able to sort out the contact center aspects, but suddenly become a telemedicine operation near overnight. Mm-hmm. And without the kind of IT support that somebody like Sprint obviously is going to have, but able to do that because our contact center as a service and UC as a service solutions are just that good these days, and our video collaboration.
That's a great point. We're going to revisit that when we talk about the intermediate term, because people are going to say, well, wait a minute, if we can do it this way, should we ever do it any other way? And I think that's what our planning call we had. You brought up a great point. We're going to revisit that. Robin, you guys do a lot of research and get a lot of analytics. What are the kind of things that you anticipate people are going to need regarding when this eventually gets to some form of stabilization around insights that they're going to need to know?
Well, I think having the insights is in fact what they need. They need the data. I mean, I'm a very data focused person, and I think you can make really sound decisions if you have decent data. So I think the key right now for any company out there is to be gathering data. You have to know, how are your agents performing? How is their productivity? How many interactions are they handling per day? What's their first call resolution? What are their sales numbers if it's a sales contact center? And then you can see, actually, first of all, in the short term, you can look at what's happening with our metrics. We don't want our customer ratings to go down the tank. We don't want revenue to be affected. We want to be helping our customers, all the things you care about. So first you can see from the short term through these analytics, okay, what do we need to do? I talked to one manufacturer who was really working on that, a consumer product manufacturer who's really trying to get these analytics in place for the supervisors so they can make these quick decisions every day, every hour, every week, however they were looking at the different data points, depending on what the data point was. And they were able to try and, keep everyone at least the same level that they were when they were all in the same contact center. So I think it's just having that data for the near term to keep everything running properly and efficiently. Where I think it really becomes interesting is after we're over this, which hopefully is soon. Hopefully we're talking about the future phase of this sooner than we all hope or than we're all thinking. But anyway, I think having this data for the future is really going to help a lot too, because what I found with one of the companies that we're talking to, they're saying, this is crazy. We're seeing better performance now with our agents at home. They're working more. They're not taking as many breaks. Maybe that's because they're bored and they don't have anything else to do, but they're working more. And their sales metrics are better. So why is that? What's happening at home? And is that going to be the case for other companies? Are they going to see that their metrics are better when their agents were home and their supervisors remote? Are they going to be worse? Are they going to be better for some, worse for others, better in some regions, worse in other regions? Then you can take all that data and make a really, really informed decision after all this is behind us as to what you do next. Do you keep people at home, and do you keep them at home all the time or part-time?
If I might, just a quick word. We've had teleworking solutions and agent-at-work solutions, Zach knows this, for 20 years. And yet there have been a lot of concerns about, can we manage our agents remotely? Will they work remotely? And to your point, maybe this trial by fire, literally,
exactly,
is going to make people realize that, yes, this in fact does work.
Yeah, it's interesting. That kind of helps us pivot to kind of our midterm discussion. I think this is really important. Winston Churchill had a saying at the end of the Battle of Britain, this is not the beginning of the end, it's the end of the beginning. And I think we're kind of maybe getting to that phase here. And so now we have to say, okay, so that has happened. Now what? What do we do? And I think that there's some interesting thoughts around that. Robin, you had just completed a bunch of research on AI, which is applicable regardless of the situation. And as you see here on the screen, you have some insights that you would share that could be even more relevant in the scenario we find ourselves in. Can you talk to that information that you guys captured?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, we see that companies are using AI a lot, and it's growing quite a bit. So if you look at the first chart with 2018 data, we asked organizations to what extent they were using or planning to use AI in their digital customer experience initiatives, and it was 45%. In 1 year, that went up to 61%, so 36% growth in 1 year. So first point is just companies are using AI, or they're planning to use AI in all different levels, small projects, larger projects. So as we talk to companies about AI, we have a roadmap. It's somewhat high level, but we have a roadmap that we look at as a good point, sort of a good starting point to think about these things and look at this then again in the current environment. So identifying business goals and identifying problems and opportunities as the first two things. So what are you trying to do here? Are you trying to improve your ratings? Are you trying to increase revenue? Are you trying to decrease costs? What's your real goal from a business perspective? And then what are some of the problems and opportunities that you're trying to address? So there could be all kinds of opportunities from the business units. But right now, I think what is really on people's minds is, well, we've got some problems right now given the pandemic. We have to meet the immediate need, but then we need to meet the need moving forward as to how we get our business back on track once this is all behind us. So what are those problems specifically that you're looking at trying to solve? And then from there, look at the budget. So great, there could be all different ways that we can solve some of these problems. And, for example, being able to address more calls in the amount of time we have, first call resolution numbers going up, being able to make recommendations that have some prediction, predictive analytics around them. So there's a lot you can do. You have to be realistic, though. So what kind of budget can you put forth to an AI, roadmap, and then look at all the different technology. And there's a lot of different ways you can use AI, and then, of course, measuring success. If you don't measure your success, it's going to be very difficult to get more budget in the future if you don't have that success behind you to support you. So as we looked at what problems and opportunities companies were looking at for AI to address, some of it was just very broad, like we're trying to improve customer experience. So if we can do some NLP or speech analytics and make some recommendations based on that, that would be great. Or escalate a call when we see that a customer's typing in all caps with exclamation points, get a supervisor on the line. Then there are other things like just using more self-service capabilities, AI-enabled knowledge bases to guide customers around where they can find an answer quickly without requiring any live agents. Then using those agents more effectively and reducing the long customer hold times too. So if we can just have our agents focusing on problems at hand that require, the human brain, that don't require just, our overnight mailing address is this. But no, it's a more complex issue. Let's put the agents in those calls there. And then that can, of course, help scale the company growth overall if you can augment employees inside or outside the contact center with AI. And then just serving your internal customers as well. That's another way we see companies using AI, just being able to bring HR and IT processes in a more automated fashion.
Yeah, I think,
it's really...
So to summarize what you're saying from an intermediate point of view, right? As we immediately send agents home, we don't have the option to start an AI project, right? But as we think about this being a 3 or 4 month process, there perhaps being a second wave as we look forward to the fall or the early winter, I think there's the opportunity now to Zach's point of being at the end of the beginning to start to think about how do we plan for the next phase, almost to your point, the next campaign.
Yeah, that is interesting. Omar, you came to us from an AI startup that you built cloud native, and you're helping us get a lot of that infused into our business. I mean, what are some specific ways you would see from your background with this helping in this position we find ourselves in?
Yeah, there's several ways that we can help agents become super agents, but I just want to go back to something Robin said. You basically looked at the 36% increase between 2018 and 2019 in how people would deploy AI. If we could do a survey in January and then basically 60 days later, I think you would find a huge jump there. And one of these basic areas is because of the need to use a voice bot as a form of call deflection. That use case alone is just going to get a lot of runtime with agencies and companies and organizations that were thinking about this, but it wasn't urgent. Now it's top of mind. We have situations where we are deploying things like this in days, and we're doing it in partnership with several organizations. So I think that's going to be one of the big intermediate use cases, which is just put up a voice bot, which is really just a combination of 3 technologies. It's, you have someone come through an IVR and you're doing voice to text, then you're applying intent detection, and then you're going text to speech. And then if that doesn't, there's a couple of turns of conversation. If that doesn't work, it gets bubbled back up to a human. So it's an escalation back to humans. So that use case, I think, is going to get a lot of airtime in the immediate to intermediate time. If you look at the next couple of use cases, which I think are squarely in the intermediate and not, in the immediate now for COVID, it's the turning agents into super agents by bubbling up answers to them because the AI is listening with them, identifying previous cases from the knowledge base or from previous resolutions, and bubbling up answers to them. That's a popular one. And the third area I would say is automated wrap up of the call, so they don't have to take the 5 minutes to wrap it up themselves. But one of the key things I'd say, again, in the intermediate time frame is, although, as someone who's really trying to bring AI to the market, I'd love for our customers to use all of these and more. I would mostly recommend that they try one of them at a time and they get really good at it. Yep. And then they jump to the other, because this is the problem you get with AI, that you get the unbounded expectation. You throw all the difficult problems at it and you wonder why it didn't go as you might have expected. So better for you to take a single use case, like you were saying, the simple queries, like, getting the right address, hours of operation, those kinds of things. Get the easy ones out first, get a skill set. That's what's going to get you to be better and ahead of your competitors if you step into this carefully, so that you learn and start adding to it incrementally.
Excellent points. Sheila, I'd love your opinion on this. A lot of times in financial issues or things like this that affect society, people tend to hunker down and things grind to a halt. But at the very same time, what got us here won't get us there, meaning cloud adoption actually may be something we want to accelerate during this time frame, which is counterintuitive to what people do. They tend to just stop making decisions. So what's your opinion on adoption of cloud in regards to what's going on with COVID right now for contact center?
Right, so similar to what Robin talked about with respect to AI adoption, MZA had just published some research about where they saw cloud adoption today, about 17% of agents being supported from a cloud-based application, and where they saw that would be at the end of 2023. And what they saw was that 17 moving to about 35%. But to Omar's point, I think if we were to do that research again this minute, we would see that 35% be much higher. Because to your point, Zach, we're seeing the acceleration of plans. Companies who looked and said, I can stay on this premises equipment for 2 or 3 more years. I can continue to sweat these assets. I can use an offer like Cisco's Flex Plan, right, to start moving toward an operating model instead of a capital expense model. But I'm not going to make that big leap yet, right? And we're definitely seeing the acceleration of those plans. The telemedicine organization I talked about earlier, or the pain management company, I mean, they were perfectly happy with their premises-based equipment, and then realized that the agility they needed just wasn't supported by the premises-based equipment. And to your point, as people start looking at the long-term implications, suddenly when you've had this kind of a situation, it's like what Omar said about Sprint, right? Sprint operates in regions where there are hurricanes, so they've always had a plan in place, and they had already moved toward a more agile solution. People are going to understand that agility really does make a difference, and I think we're going to see a much faster adoption. It's, we've been saying for several years, it's not if we're going to go to the cloud, it's when, and now when is sooner.
Yeah, that's a great point. When is sooner? I think that's a quote. And I say the secret of creativity is to hide your sources. So I may be quoting you here in the near future. So, okay, so now we've sort of talked about the short and midterm. Now let's step back and maybe take a couple of steps back and say, from a long-term perspective, what's the impact of this, right? What are the long tail impacts of this? Omar, what do you think is going to happen, 12, 18 months in regards to the subject matter we're talking about?
Well, I would even say just internal to our own business unit at the contact center, serving customers that are on-premise and cloud, we ourselves have seen how fast we can move in terms of, first call with a customer and then 2 days later having them up and running in a significant way. And that has reset the bar. Certainly for me, it's reset the bar of what I expect in the future in just normal doing business. So unfortunate, but that's the new bar, and I love it. So I expect our customers to be thinking that way too. Like Sheila was talking about, agility is not how they're gonna only look at a crisis response. They're gonna want to do business that way, and they're gonna make selections of vendors who understand that and who create the processes that implement that. So, when I was in both previous lives where I was running a SaaS company, we'd have the saying that says, no butts and seats are allowed to get up. You've got to think through a customer coming through and becoming a customer in your organization all the way to them using it and deployed without a single human getting out of their seat. Now, that's harder to do in some businesses, but it's a way of thinking that you're going to see be implemented more and more. The second area that I think is going to change long term is just being more sprint-like in the sense of each of us having a business continuity plan that can't foresee everything, but lays out things like how do I quickly switch my ratio from in-office to remote or mobile agents, and laying out a few items like that. How do I quickly spike up my volume? What are my response? What do I do when I have used a BPO who's in a region that when they go home, they don't have bandwidth at home? These are some of the things that you have to put in your business continuity planning, and we'll definitely be there to help.
Great, thank you. Sheila, what do you think? 12, 18 months from now, what's the long term of this regarding our, the areas that we care about here in terms of customer service, care, contact center agents, et cetera?
So I think, you and I have talked over the last couple of years about the impact of Gen Z coming into the contact center and what they need and what they want. And a lot of those capabilities, the ability to work from home, the ability to be part of a gig operation, gig economy operation as opposed to full-time work, gamification of solutions, something that provides more engagement, more analytics, to Robin's point. I think what we're seeing is that the cloud really supports all of these. And again, where it might have been the long-term plan to start building for that Gen Z agent who's already in your contact center and marching in more and more every day, I think the long-term plan will be to say what worked in the short term, what worked in the intermediate term to handle this, works in the long term for what we need to be able to do just for our aging population at all.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, very much so. And Robin, close us out here before I make a few closing comments. What about your research regarding the efficacy of home resources and what the long term may mean?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. One of the key attributes, I think, is just to reduce those employee and agent turnover rates overall. Our data is showing that if you can make agents happier, they're going to stay longer. They're going to be happier if they have a more flexible work schedule and work location. So if you can get your turnover rate in the contact center to below 15%, customer ratings actually improve by 26% in our research. So I think that's a nice goal for organizations, is to reduce that turnover rate. The other thing I would point to is real estate costs. So if you look at the average real estate cost, and I know this varies widely depending upon where you are in the country, but if you, the average real estate cost per agent per year is about $8,300. So if you just think about a contact center with just 100 people in it. If you went to hoteling, right, and just kind of said, okay, we're going to let half of our agents work from home, or we're going to let all of our agents work from home half the time, however you wanted to work it out. But let's just say 50% of your agent hours were spent at home. You're saving $415,000 a year just for a 100-person contact center. Imagine if you get that even bigger. Not to mention all the other savings, the environmental savings, and the all the other things that you can think of that would go along with that. So I think those are two real important attributes that you might want to look at moving forward.
Excellent. Excellent, thanks. Well, listen, in conclusion, I'd first like to thank our guests, Robin and Sheila, for their, as usual, astute observations and what helping us learn more. I've obviously learned something on this. Omar, thank you as our leader for being there for us and sharing your insights, not only from what you're doing now, but what you brought to us when you joined us just a few months ago. And it seems like a long time, even though it's been a short time, because of your impact on our business. For our listeners today, what we'd like to do is just remember, first of all, stay safe, do the right thing, and take care of, most important thing, your family and your loved ones. Today what we did was we took a look at the immediate impact of what's occurring around us with COVID, right? And so we said, so what, now what? But I think the real value here today is to say, what is next? As we are at the end of the beginning here, what is next for us? Do we redact ourselves back to the way we did? I don't think so. I think we learned today about leaning into and learning from this. There's going to be so many learnings on this on so many ways in society. We're just a small sliver that we're talking about. And then, of course, saying what is the long term of this? one of the things that's really interesting for all of us on this call is to really know that we're part of an essential service. A lot of my friends are in positions where they're sitting around and waiting for what's next, and we have been very, very busy, all of us. So it is good to be wanted in a situation like this because inherently what we do helps people. That's one of the things that attracted me to being in this industry is what we do literally helps people, and that's always what is something that's gratifying. So thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed this. I did. And what you can do to find out more is go to www.cisco.com, look for our contact center solutions, and also Omar's blog that he recently announced on some offers we have to help folks through this. Thanks for joining us today, and we really appreciate your time and paying attention and being along with us for the ride. Take care.
Thank you, Doc. Thanks, Sheila and Robin.
Thank you.